What cycle does the property market follow? Great question, really good question. And it's a question that, to be quite honest, every market is completely different. Okay, now you're probably gone out there, or you've probably seen at seminars, or people are talking about this property clock. And to be quite honest, some of it has, I guess, factual or purpose to the property market, depending on which one you're looking at. But for me, the one that has the most, I guess, the most accurate reading to what they're trying to say about the property clock is probably Phil Anderson, who's an economist, an Australian economist, probably not well known to some degree, but he has a great book called The Secret Life of Real Estate and Banking. I've read this book. It's a hard read. It's very sophisticated. It goes all the way back to 1800s of the property market and what happened back then, or the stock market, and as well what happened with the banks year on year out. And so definitely read that book if you're someone that has a high IQ understanding about financial literacy. That book there will give you an understanding. Now, he talks about the property clock, but it's an 18.6 year window, okay? And that there makes a lot of sense compared to what other people are just talking about the property clock, and they've got, they're, from 1 to 12, and, they spruce their things. And for me, I think that's a bit of bollocks, because, it doesn't make sense at all, okay? Now, with Phil Anderson's a little bit different, but I don't want to get too much on a tangent on this property clock cycle thing. Back in 1990, okay, interest rates were at 17%, and what happened was there was a property decrease in the market in Melbourne, okay? Melbourne and Sydney actually suffered the most. Property prices started to decrease 10, 15, 20, 30%, okay, during those times. Now, from 1990 to 1994, interest rates went from 17% to 9%, a massive drop. Property market did not take off, okay? Did not take off. From 1994 to 1996, the interest rates went back up, and then what happened was the property market did not really spike. But keep in mind, from 1990 to 1996, Perth, Brisbane, Tasmania were on fire. ACT were on fire. Property market was taking off, and kept taking off as well. Now, from 1996, Melbourne and Sydney started to take off, okay? All the way to 2000, 2001, 2002 started to take off, and it stopped around there. So from 1996 to 1998 to 2001, 2002, Melbourne and Sydney started to take off, okay? Interest rates were starting to still decrease. They were fluctuating, going up and down. During that time as well, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane weren't doing anything, okay? So we look at this and we go, okay, well, interest rates were going up and down. Some markets were responding, some weren't. So what cycle do they follow? Every market has a different cycle, and that's what I'm trying to get to. People go out here and they're sprucing all this bullshit, and I'm going to get passionate, and I'm going to lay it out there because it's all bullshit, to be quite honest. From 2002 to 2008, you can get your facts online. There's heaps of information out there. Interest rates went from 6.3% to 9.5% from 2002 to 2008. Melbourne and Sydney were lucky to grow more than, I think Melbourne grew 40% and Sydney grew 50%, okay, during that time frame. Places like Perth grew 120%. Places like Townsville, 150%. Hobart, 150%. Geraldton, 200%, okay? And the list goes on. Adelaide was on fire, 100%. But Melbourne and Sydney didn't do anything when interest rates started to, they went up three times what the current rate was. So 3% of what the current rate was back in 2002. So what cycle were they following, Melbourne and Sydney? A completely different cycle to Melbourne, to Brisbane, to Perth, to all these other suburbs and capital cities. 2012 to 2017, Melbourne and Sydney took off, okay? Interest rates were starting to drop. We had record low. The cash rate was at 1.5% at one point, and we had a low interest rate at 3%. Melbourne and Sydney took off. But what was spiking all these property markets? What was spiking it? There was a lot of things. You had the mining boom at one point when the GFC hit from 2007, 2008, 2006 to 2010 or 11, depending what areas it was. You had the mining boom. and then it bust. You had as well from 2012 to 2017, Melbourne and Sydney had a massive infrastructure pipeline getting implemented, population growth, and a lot of things starting to happen. Okay, back when in the early 2000s, when Brisbane was taking off and Perth was taking off, there was a lifestyle change. There was a lot of infrastructure projects. That's when the city started to get developed. Okay, and those things started to happen. You started to have the, back in the early 90s, you had the West Coast Eagles coming to Perth, a new football team, created new things. Okay, as well, and that's not a massive thing. That's why the property prices took off. But that had an effect, especially with what was happening in the economy from an infrastructure perspective. So keep in mind, not every market is always trending up. They're not. It's impossible. Okay, as we see now in today's market, Melbourne and Sydney are retracting and they're dropping, and there's markets across Melbourne and Sydney. And I know for a fact one of my friends has a property here in Melbourne, 12 k's out from the CBD, okay, North Melbourne, northern suburbs of Melbourne. The valuation, because he wanted to build a block of units on his property, okay, they came back after he's got the permits. It's taken him nearly 2 years to get the permits. They've come back, they valued their property 25% less than what he got the current value when COVID hit in 2021. So I look at that and I go, okay, well, the market's decreased, and we can all see it. It's all in core logic. But what I'm trying to say is there's no cycle. Every market has a different cycle. There's no cycle that every property market follows at the same time. They have their cycles at different times. And so when you're doing your research, you just got to understand what is going on. When has this market started its cycle? A cycle can last from 5 to 7 years of strong capital growth, and then it'll start to plateau or start to decrease or retract. Every market does it. Okay, there's not a market that hasn't done it. Okay, and there's normally a good year of that strong growth continuing for that 5 to 7 years, and you just got to make sure that you're doing the right DD and you understand what's going on. Now, I'm not going to touch on how you find that out. That is something that this video, it's probably going to go for another hour if I'm going to show you and explain that to you, but it takes a lot of research and understanding what's happening in the market. Okay, once again, pretty simple, but I'm going to lay out the lines. Creation of jobs, infrastructure pipeline, movement of people. Okay, these are three big main movers that will start to change the economy and start to affect the property prices. Then there's other things that will come into that. A low level of building approvals, okay, undersupply of property, a low listing level of rental properties on the market. That will start to have an effect, and that all starts to boil up the property market, and things start to take off. So it starts from a federal level and it works its way down from a state to a council level as well. And so that's what you have to look at, the 3-tier strategy of what they're doing from the government perspective. And then you move that onto into the suburb or location of where you are going to invest and what's happening. Okay, so today I see in places like South Australia, Queensland, Perth, or WA, you could say, on fire. There's a lot of things happening. Okay, there's a lot of things going on. Some of the fastest growing regions are in those states or in those states. I should say territories, because I didn't mention any territories there. So that is something for you guys to understand, that the property clock can be a bit of bullshit out there, to be honest. I do like Phil Anderson's property clock. It makes a lot of sense as well. He does have facts in his books that kind of, that will relate to his property clock. It's a lot different to everyone else's out there when they're just spruiking this clock out there saying, interest rates go down, property prices go down, and when interest rates go, when interest rates go down, property prices go up. When interest rates go up, property prices go down. It's all BS. It's all bullshit. I'm sorry, guys. And I just want to be frank, because at the end of the day, people, they don't understand what they're talking about. They talk about this, property clock, and interest rates are going up, and the property price is going to go down. This is a great time to buy, and they're not doing their research. There's no analysis. Once again, I've done videos on this. Please visit our YouTube channel. I've spoken about this, and there is a video actually going to come out probably next week where I've actually broken it all down and actually put pictures there to show people there's evidence that what happened back then with property prices going up and down because of interest rates as well, and what was causing those spikes. Okay, thank you once again. Hopefully this is a bit of value. Hopefully this gives you a bit of reassurance. But once again, please don't just take my advice. Go out there and actually do research. Go out there and actually have a look Have a look at what those markets did back in from 2002 to 2008, what markets done well, what markets didn't do well. Have a look what happened from 1990 to all the way to 1999. What markets did well and what didn't do well. Have a look at the interest rates as well from those years as well. Don't just take my advice. Go out there and learn it. Go out there and actually have a look and look at the evidence. And I guarantee you, you're going to change your perspective and be like, you know what, Frank actually knows what he's talking about. He's not here saying that there is a property clock and there's a doom and gloom and, you know, you got to get out now or you got to get in and there's this and this and that, all that BS. Go out there, do your own research, have a look what's going on, have a look what market's doing tremendously well at the moment. Is it a great time to buy? It's a great time to buy when you can afford it. That's the best time to buy. When there is a down in the market, there is an up in another market. When there is an up in another market, there's a down in another market. Property markets work the same. Doesn't matter what happens. There's always going to be an up and down in all over Australia during certain periods of time. The GFC, the property market in Australia did not go down everywhere. There were certain markets that did affect that. During COVID, there was property markets that went down, some didn't go, and a lot of them went up. Okay, in the early 90s, when there was a recession in Australia in the 90s, okay, property markets went down, some went up. Okay, so please look at data, look at all the evidences out there, and see what happened. Okay, so I'll leave that with you. Have a great weekend. Once again, thank you for posting your comments on here, and as well, you know, asking for what information you want to be spoken about. If you do want a video on this topic, especially with data, I'm pretty sure there's one coming out, but I can bring it another one that's going to be coming out and I'll get more sophisticated. It'll probably go for a good 15-20 minutes. That will touch on what happened back in the past, what happened now, and what is going on. If you do want that, please just leave a comment and say, you know, please post video, property cycles. Please post, video of property cycles, or just put property cycles part 2 down below. Property cycles part 2 down below in the comments, and I will create something like that if people are interested in that evidence. Okay, thank you once again. Have a great weekend.